third is Suarez. Goodell comes running in. He's under it, makes the catch. Here's the throw to the plate. It's in the air. He is out! Cameron Rick hangs on! Oh, man, what a play! Deep to right field. Way up there, and way out! Second
All right, the hibernation period is over. The World Series is over, so we get to talk about the only time of the year the Phillies seem to win, and that's the offseason. A lot went on, I guess, in a sense already, without any actual baseball moves. The Phillies added three or four new owners, including someone who was anonymous, and Sam Fuld is going back to school or something, and Preston Mattingly is the general manager now. So a lot of changes in the front office for the Phillies. They've apparently added $500 million though through this new ownership group that came in, which is a pretty big number, obviously. Other than that, I mean, Dodgers crushed the Yankees in the World Series. Wasn't all that competitive. I mean, other than that, I mean, it's just time to get in the off season. We have a lot of different things to talk about because it's a unique off season in the sense that Phillies have a lot to do, but there's not a lot of ways they could necessarily do these things. And I'm curious now, obviously Preston Mattingly ran the minor league system. The Phillies were already pretty stingy with their prospects. Now that the guy who was in charge of all those guys is in charge of trades, are they even going to be stingier because they're his guys? That's something I'm curious about what's going to happen. So there's a lot to get into here, but it's a unique offseason in the sense that they don't have a lot of money to spend and they seem to want to hang on to their prospects, but they have to change things. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think like maybe 5 or 6 hours before we're recording this, Brian Kaplan, who kind of, we've talked about how well they've done in terms of developing pitching the last few years and, selling high on some of these guys with Clausen this year and Sam Aldegheri, I think I said his name right, this year, going to the Angels. Obviously they were, great prospects here, borderline elite prospects here this year, and they got to Angels. They were atrocious. Part of that could be, the Angels not having a good development system. And the other part of it is the Phillies had, a very good to elite pitcher development system in the last few years. Brian Kaplan was the driver in that. He was the head of pitching development, and he just left us today for, I believe, the pitching coach job in Arizona. I don't know if it was a head pitching coach, but I assume it was because he was the assistant pitching coach here. So unless he has ties to Arizona, I'm assuming he left for promotion. But makes sense. He was really good at his job. So it'll be interesting to see what they kind of do to go about that farm system, because obviously Brian Barber's still there, who's been the head of scouting the last few years when they've pulled in some of these kind of replenishments to the farm system. They've done a really good job at restocking it, I think. At least the last, this last draft class wasn't my favorite, but as far as like the Aiden Miller and the Justin Crawford draft classes go, like they've done a really good job at stocking the system with those guys. So, Preston's not in the role that he was now, and with Brian Kaplan being gone, I'll be interested to see what they do to kind of bring in replacements. Obviously, like keeping Preston in our organization, moving him up to GM, I think is a huge accomplishment, because I think he's obviously really good at what he does, being an evaluator of talent. Now we'll get to do that for more than just minor leaguers. We'll get to do it for major leaguers as well. So excited to keep him around, and hopefully they can, like you said, they have to be creative this off season in how they kind of rearrange some things, because we've seen the articles, especially this week and a half. They've seemed to be shopping a lot of different guys that are, pretty household names as far as this specific core that we've seen the last few years goes. So it's some guys with team control, some guys with a lot of name. Be interesting to see how Preston and Dave kind of go about that as their first challenge in working together.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be interesting. So, I mean, let's just start diving into it. But I think before we get into that, let's talk about Juan Soto. I don't have him included. The Phillies honestly aren't even being brought up that much with him. I just don't think they could afford another one of these monster decade-long contracts, and this one could honestly be as much as they've gave Harper and Turner combined. No, that's on the high side, I think, but like seriously, like it could be. I think, you don't want to see him go to the Yankees or the Mets. I mean, if this guy could just go to the Blue Jays, it'd be great. But
or the Red Sox.
I think if teams are in this bidding war, it's kind of nice if you can do all these underlying moves that you want to do and, focus on bullpen guys and some depth pitching and maybe a different outfielder. So I'm, obviously if Juan Soto came here, like we would freak out and everything. And I'm not going to sit here and say like bringing Juan Soto is bad by any means, but I think with where they're at, it probably is more beneficial to allocate all that money and years to a lot of different places and not bring in another one of these big contracts, because I also don't think ownership really wants to.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we were kind of planning for this the last week or so, we were kind of talking about whether or not we were going to do so. And obviously, like, getting that guy on your team would be an ideal off season. But, kind of like you said, we were mentioned at first, but I think, in year 3 of us kind of being big spenders in the off season or the trade deadline or something, and seeing his tactics, I think we all kind of knew that it was like Scott Boras using his Phillies connection to up the price initially. So like, I don't think we really read too much into it. And then obviously Jeff Passan tweeted out today that a bunch of teams were meeting with him. The Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, and there might have been one other team. But like, yeah, I don't foresee Soto coming here. And honestly, we've said it the last 2 years at the deadline, and we've seen it happen 2 years in the playoffs. We have enough big contracts on this team at some point that like they have to show up. You can't just, keep compiling these 300, 400, in this case, probably $600 million contract into a lineup and, be like, oh, this is the one that's going to change everything. In theory, this lineup should have enough there. They really have enough money on or available to them to kind of make the team that we need them to make in order to do this right. So if you were kind of looking at the biggest names in the offseason, yes, Soto would be a dream, but another guy that I'd honestly prefer just because of, situation, finance, everything else that I also didn't include in my perfect offseason because it's not realistic is Roki Sasaki. We talked about him a bunch last year, but he's, we saw what Yamamoto did in the World Series. Roki Sasaki is more talented in terms of pure stuff. He is much younger, and you're going to be getting him, whoever gets him, probably the Dodgers. They're getting him on a minor league deal that is solely based on their national money. So it's one of the $700 million contracts, even though, like, realistically off age and pure stuff, it should be a $700 million contract because this dude is that good. So that would probably be the big fish that I'd prefer over Soto. But again, I didn't include him just because he's a Dodger. It's already done.
Yeah, and I also saw, obviously, with these Japanese players, the West Coast always gets the priority. There's just a large Asian population on the West Coast. It's kind of what they're familiar with, so that's kind of obvious. But the Padres were also in talks, and the Mariners I saw were also kind of involved, and they're an interesting one to me. And I have a trade with that team actually in my offseason, but they have a lot of pitching. If they were to get him, they might want to move some more of that pitching, and they're not a good hitting team. And the Phillies have some hitters that they're kind of sour on right now. So I think, that they could be an interesting trade partner for the Phillies. And I would honestly root for them to get Sasaki, because I think it could benefit the Phillies in a sense if, they wanted to make one of their starters expendable then.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure. And
yeah.
The Phillies were, obviously, all the reports came out last year that they went as hard as they could at Yamamoto. They offered him, the highest amount of money. They really wanted to make an effort to establish a footprint in Japan. I think Roki kind of got posted a year earlier than everyone expected. And obviously, it doesn't help with the Dodgers already having Ohtani and Yamamoto and being on that West Coast market, like you mentioned, fresh off of like a dominant World Series win. So like the deck's definitely stacked for the Dodgers to get him. But I know we sent a lot of our high priority, if not all high priority scouts over to Japan a week or two ago. So again, like, they're setting themselves up to be in the mix for these Japanese players going forward. But if the kind of contingent that the Dodgers already have of them and being on the West Coast, I don't know how competitive even the Phillies, but any team in general will be, I guess. But yeah, he'd be the guy that I would prefer in terms of big name guys going into this perfect offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that, honestly. There's a few big names available. We could get into it, but I think let's start with signings, honestly, because I think the signings actually, which is interesting, is the least intriguing part of the offseason for the Phillies. I think the trades are a little juicier. So I noticed I'm just going to get this out of the way because I think we both have this. We're both bringing Hoffman back. I think he likes being here. I think they want him back. I know he didn't look that great in the NLDS, but he gave them the last year and a half in the regular season, and in the 2023 playoff run was more than enough to justify bringing him back. I think we're a little off on money. We're about the same years. I was like 35, 36. I think you were closer to 39, 40.
Yeah, I think I did 39.
Yeah. So I think we both see that as an obvious return. I wish that honestly got done already, because then you could kind of move on with the rest of your offseason, but that's something I'd like to see get done. I have no interest in bringing Estevez back. I don't know about you. The Grand Slam was good enough for me. I think I'm done there. And his underlying numbers weren't that great. I don't know how sustainable he is long term. If I had to give one of those two guys 3 years, it's definitely Hoffman over Estevez.
Yeah, agreed. I'm curious to see what Hoffman's market looks like, because there was that report a week or two ago that there's industry belief that some teams might pursue him or inquire about him being a starter. I'm good on that. You just mentioned the Estevez Grand Slam. I actually blame Thompson the most for that, but Hoffman sat for 25 minutes and then did whatever he did to get the bases loaded. So Estevez gave it up, but it was just a shitty spot to be in. But that point, we saw Hoffman sit for 20 minutes and go back for a second. Starters have to do that. That's what happens when you're a starting pitcher sometimes. So that in itself, the last impression that we had from Jeff Hoffman this year was him sitting and then going back to pitch like a simulated start almost, and it blew up in flames. So I don't really know where that report came from. With that being said, Hoffman is a stud. I'm hoping he kind of gives, I went 3 for 39. I think Tim Kelly in his Bleacher Report article the other day had that exact contract for 39. So I think contract might have been closer to your number than mine in terms of what the yearly value would look like. But I'd hope that he'd kind of give us something like your number, maybe save us like 3 or 4 million, just because not hometown discount because he obviously didn't come up here, but he was, a failed experiment that got brought in because, Bryce Harper, his Vegas buddy, had a Tommy John type thing where, Hoffman got eyes on him because of that. And the Phillies were one of the only teams that really gave him a chance. So I'm hoping there'd kind of be some kind of organizational discount, throw us a bone there. But yeah, Estevez just gave up too many barrels for me. It didn't really seem like swing and miss stuff. And also I just have like the fact that Johan Rojas hit a home run off of him in like May, whenever we were out in LA against the Angels, in the back of my head. And that just doesn't seem like a guy I want as my closer, someone that Johan Rojas can go yard off of. So I'm good on that.
Yeah, that's fair. And I honestly forgot about that. All right. So did you have any other free agent signings? I couldn't remember looking on that.
I did.
Okay.
I did. Do you?
So
rip through mine.
I mean, mine goes hand in hand.
They're all very minor.
Okay, because see, like I was gonna go through. I'm gonna go through this at the end. The spot track listing, because I wanted to pick out a couple depth pieces together because I couldn't really decide on like the Spencer Turnbull type signings.
Okay.
For this offseason.
I have no other starters.
Okay.
Which is probably a miss on my part because I really don't want to deal with Taiwan, but I just like watch every Andrew Painter Arizona Fall League highlight I see, and I've just kind of erased Taiwan Walker from my memory and forgot Tommy John exists, and just convinced myself that Painter will be full systems go, no inning limit, even though obviously that's not the case. But I haven't really dipped my toes into any starters. So we can go through that at the end, and I will randomly form to say.
Yeah, so the thing is, I'm moving on from Marsh, and I'm very stuck between the two guys in left field. But I ultimately went with Anthony Santander from the Orioles. I think a deal close to what Schwarber got, like 4 for 75, is where I was at. He's 30, which I think is the age Schwarber was also a free agent. I think so, like 29, 30. So that's where I'm at with there. It was between him and Tyler O'Neill. They're not like O'Neill barreled the ball up a lot better this past season, but he was in the 5th percentile in whiff percentage and the 2 percentile in K rate. Now he was up to 87 in walk rate, whereas Santander was in 60 percentile in walk rate, but his whiff was 76 percentile and his K was 66 percentile. But his barrel rate was lower, his exit velocity was lower. I just think that he's a righty that played in Camden Yards, and he still put up 40 home runs.
It was the highest home run total for a switch hitter in a while.
Oh yeah, he's a switch hitter. Sorry, O'Neill's the righty, but still, like I think you get him going more to the right side, and he doesn't worry about that cutout in freaking left field in Camden Yards, and he could come to Citizens Bank Park, which is a smaller ballpark overall, not just with that cutout. I think he's kind of the perfect guy to put fourth behind Harper and just mash. They need a righty bat that can get over 30 home runs, because right now your power bats are mostly, or not even mostly, they are Schwarber and Harper. Those are the two guys you expect to get over 30 home runs a year, and Castellanos is just not there anymore. Bohm has never been there. Turner was there a little bit, but it's clear that's not going to happen. And Real Mito's even past the point of 20 home runs, it seems like. So I need a righty power bat to put in the middle of the lineup. I have concerns, about like him every day in the field. Whatever, we went to the World Series with Schwarber in left field. I think we could live with it. I don't think it's a total long-term handcuff either. And I think it's got to be a righty because if I'm not getting rid of Justin Crawford in a trade, I think he eventually takes over in center. So that's another lefty in here, and I'm not getting rid of Stott. And obviously you have Harper, and I don't know what they're going to do with Schwarber long-term, but there's already a lot of lefties in this lineup. I need a righty. I need a righty that hits a lot of home runs. So I went with Santander. I don't know if that happens. I don't even know if they're interested in him. It hasn't really come up, but I just feel like he's kind of what they need, the switch / righty to put in the middle of the lineup that's just going to hit a ton of home runs.
Yeah, I mean, I love Santander. I had him on both my fantasy teams this year. He is a stud, and he did it in a relatively pitcher-friendly park. That's Camden Yards, especially with that new wall in there, like you said. So I'd be all for it. I thought about including him for sure. The only reason that I didn't was I didn't really know what the contract would look like. I couldn't bring myself to look at this core and be like, I need another 5, 6, 7 year contract in there. He's 30. He probably doesn't want to do free agency. Initially, when I did my perfect offseason, I had him in a 3 or 4 year contract and up the money. Like I think Schwarber was 4 for $80. I think I had Santander in my initial one at like 4 for $90. Kind of throw a higher AAV at him. I think Spot Track had him at like 17.1 million.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going off of. Yeah.
Estimated. So I was like, maybe if I did something like a 4 year with like an AAV like 22 or 23, he might be inclined to take that over more years. But ultimately, I think we went a different route in terms of the hitters that we were trying to add. But yeah, if they got Santander, I'd be stoked for sure.
Yeah, I know the strikeout thing and the whiff and all that, and not putting balls in play is a big thing. I also just feel like, Trey Turner can get back to doing that. If Alec Boehm can not do whatever the hell he did in the last month and a half of the season, which maybe wasn't totally healthy, then I do have 2 righty contact bats. And if Bryson Stott can forget whatever the hell his approach was this past season and get back to 2023, I have another contact bat in my lineup. And then I'm, thinking about Justin Crawford eventually coming up here, and there's another contact first bat in my lineup. So I think the contact thing can actually be fixed internally. So I don't see a 40 home run righty / switch hit bat in the system. So I think I gotta go get it, which was kind of like the thought process I had there.
Yeah, and I think, going off of that thought process, honestly, I feel like Turner got this big contract, and if you look around the lineup at the lack of righty power, he's probably pressing a bit, thinking that he has to be the guy to get those power numbers up. So like if you bring in a guy that is kind of that switch or, right-handed option to hit bombs, Turner might kind of retreat back to, hitting more, striking out less, and, going gap to gap more instead of flailing, trying to guess right on a fastball and hitting the ball over the fence. So, by that, again, if they got Santander, I would be stoked. He was in my initial draft, my perfect offseason, but I pivoted. I don't really have any free agent signs for bats, but if I did, he would be my main one.
Yeah. All right. So I know you have a couple trades. So drop the first one.
You want me to do the first trade?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I know you mentioned it. I'm trading Brandon Marsh, and I was debating where I wanted to go with it. I had a couple mocked up as far as relievers go. The first one that I had was for the Giants. didn't work, but the one that I settled on, and I hate this trade calculator. I don't think it's accurate. But for this sake, I was going off the values, and based on the model, we are overpaying in this. But I am trading Brandon Marsh to the St. Louis Cardinals for Ryan Helsley and Brendan Donovan. So Helsley obviously led the league, or was leading the league for a while in saves. One of, if not the best closers in the National League, all baseball for sure. Elite stuff. Obviously, we know him for what happened in 2022, but the fastball is elite. He misses a ton of bats. The contract, I believe, is expiring after this year. Maybe one more year after, but I think it's expiring after this year, so that's why his value is a little bit lower. I know they're talking about trading Arenado and Goldschmidt, so it seems like they'd be willing to do it and take on a guy with a little bit more team control like Marsh. So Helsley's not the hurdle for me. I think that this trade would get stalled at Brendan Donovan. I am a huge Brendan Donovan fan. I know you just talked about this team potentially being able to solve the contact issue in-house and not needing another lefty. Well, Brendan Donovan is kind of that contact-oriented lefty. His K rate, he was in the 97th percentile for strikeout rate as a hitter last year. He struck out 12.4% of the time compared to Marsh, 36. Traded Marsh for a guy who hits better than him and cuts his strikeouts in a third, while also giving us the option of elite. I think he was the Gold Glove winner for the utility position 2 years ago. He could play second and the outfield. But the things that really stuck out to me, his expected batting average was in the 87th percentile. Squared up balls 35% of the time in the 98th percentile. And the whip K rate were 95 percentile or higher. He seems like a guy that you can really slot in between some of these righties in, the upper half of the lineup or probably the middle half and extend, or if you want to go with him in like an 8 or 9 and get guys on for Schwarber or Turner at the top of the order. He's really a guy that you could plug and play anywhere in the lineup because he just hits and he doesn't really make bad swing decisions while also giving you elite defense. I was very high on Marsh at the start of the year, and he started off very hot, but we've seen it 2 years in a row now where he's fizzled out pretty miserably in terms of the strikeout rate soaring again. And, he's just not what this lineup needs when you have so many other guys that you're committed to with a lot of money. I don't think the pros outweigh the cons, and we haven't really seen a leap to justify keeping him around. So yeah, I'm trading him for a different version, but a better version of himself and an elite closer.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that trade. I know Helsley's come up a lot, and Devin Williams have come up a lot too. It seems like though, like the Brewers are more interested in Bohm. To me, like I'm also trading Marsh for a closer, but I kind of went for a guy with a little more control. Andres Munoz out in Seattle. They need bats. When I put that in the trade calculator, it was honestly an even 1-for-1 trade. If you have to add some low-level pitching prospects, like go ahead. He has, I think, at least 2 years, maybe 3 years of control left.
I think this one and 2 more.
Okay, 2 more. Monster season last year, I think 2.12 ERA, was 22 out of 27 save opportunities, whip under 1. He's going to be 26 on opening day this upcoming season, so still growing. If they're willing to do that trade straight up, I would gladly do that, especially with me getting Santander. The back half of my bullpen being Munoz, Hoffman, Strom, and then Alvarado and Kerkering as my back 5. I really like that. So that's my one trade, honestly, because I'm not moving Bohm, and I know he's coming up in trade talks, and we'll go through this the free agents in a second. I guess we'll go through the list, but I'm not giving Alex Bregman 6 or 7 years. And outside of him, I don't see who's available that's better than Bohm for how frustrating Bohm was at the end of the year. Bregman's the only player that's better than him, and I don't know if the money in the years is worth that. You have Adam Miller coming up probably a year and a half away. I think you just ride Bohm out at this point, unfortunately. I guess that's an unfortunate thing, but unless you go after Ha-Seong Kim, I don't see someone who makes sense to move Bohm. I don't want Arenado. He's regressing, and that money's bad. I just think if you're going to make up a move, switch up a move, which I think you have to do, I definitely think Marsh makes the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely in the camp of trading Bohm, but then, once you kind of brought it up to me the other day, that you don't realize how slim the third base position kind of is in baseball. Obviously Bohm was the starter for the NL and the All-Star game last year. So realistic trade candidates aren't necessarily there, and it's not a particularly good third base or field class in general in terms of free agency. So yeah, I think of those two, Marsh and Bohm, Marsh is definitely the more logical trade chip, because you can always do the Padres theory and get a guy that I thought about including in this perfect offseason, Jurickson Profar, load up on shortstops and play them around the outfield in corners. And, it works. 9 times out of 10, shortstops are the most athletic people on the field. That's why there's been discourse since he came up in the majors as a center fielder, and since the day we signed him, moved Trey Turner to the outfield. Most of the time it's because people are, ripping his shortstop defense, which again is fair, but you can move him to the outfield because he'd be a good outfielder. You can move shortstops or 9 times out of 10 an infielder around to the outfield, but it's, almost never possible to do the opposite and move an outfielder into the corner. So yeah, it's tough to find a third baseman. It's not as tough to find an outfielder.
Yeah, and the only other thing that even somewhat makes sense would be if you trade Bohm, sign Willy Adames, and then you're moving your whole infield around, because one of, I guess, Stott would play third, maybe, I don't know, and Turner played second or Adames plays second, and it's just kind of you gave both Turner and in this case Adames, you gave them both shortstop money, and one of them isn't playing shortstop and all that. There's no logical replacement outside of waiting to see what Adam Miller is, or even, Starling Cavo's too far down the line, but pretty much just what Adam Miller is. And, if he can be the one, or if later, Turner has to move off of short and they think third is a better option, stuff like that. I just think it's better to kind of maybe play the waiting game with those options than put money at Alex Bregman or the complicated situation with Willy Adames. I just think holding on to him is better at this point. I don't see what you can really upgrade that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about him a bunch. We're big Aiden Miller guys. I think, the majority of the fan base is he's going to be really good. So you're in a tough spot. Obviously, Bohm didn't pan out the way that we all kind of hoped. We've been saying for 3 years that he made a jump, starts hitting home runs. But yes, the hitting's gotten better, but not in the way that we all kind of expected it to with his frame and with his makeup. And the last few years haven't ended particularly well either. And he hasn't grown up as a 28-year-old, and there's still tantrums a lot, which, after the season ended, I was very eager to kind of get a package together and trade him. But I don't think the market kind of allows that. So he's getting to the point where now Aiden Miller is probably a year or two away, and there's going to start to be some serious heat on him. So he's going to have to grow up and figure it out. Bohm's going to have to figure it out on his end. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see, hopefully. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to commit money to Bregman or any of the other third basemen in this class.
Yeah, and I mean, even if eventually Bohm has to work himself off of third, there's still opportunities for him to stay with the Phillies because Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos are towards the end here. So the DH spot could open up, or, Harper could go to DH and Bohm could play first, or Bohm could go to DH and Harper stays at first. Like there's things that could happen that could keep him here. So he does have to kind of play for that if he wants to stay here, which I don't know if he does. But if he does want to stay here, he still has those type things to play for. Aiden Miller being good isn't necessarily the end of the line for him. So, that's something else to keep in mind. So let's hit up the other trade, because this one, I know this one's good.
Yeah. So I don't really know. This is for a bench bat. Obviously, I, was a Cody Clemens fan last year. Some of the guys that they've had as bench bats have been great, but I think this one is an upgrade over that in terms of, like, he could be an everyday player. He's played time at left field. He can give Harper a spell. So the trade that I constructed was trading with the Giants for Lamont Wade Jr., first left fielder, lefty bat. He killed the Phillies the last 2 years, really, that they were in San Francisco, if I remember correctly. I have us trading Devin Saltaban and Carlos De La Cruz. I know the Giants have said that they're willing to shed payroll. I don't know what that means as far as what they're looking for in trades. Realistically, I think probably Saltaban could just get it done. I think that calculator's a little bit lower on him than the industry might be as a whole. That might just be me talking as a Phillies fan. I think he's in product, and Tyler Fitzgerald was good for the Giants last year at shortstop. I don't think they have a ton of shortstop depth in their system, whereas they just signed Matt Chapman to an extension, so they kind of have the corners locked up, because I explored a trade there with Bohm. But like trading one of our middle tier prospects, where we have obviously Trey at shortstop. Aiden Miller is on record saying that he wants to stay a shortstop. Obviously, like, if Trey's still here playing shortstop, that can't happen. So he's probably a third baseman. And then we have Kaba in the system as well. So we have a lot of shortstops. Saltman's kind of expendable. He was a second-round pick in the Justin Crawford draft, I believe, from Hawaii, high schooler. So I think he would get it done himself. But just going for lefty bench bat, it seems like a lot of – I just always go back to Jake Cave ending the World's – like – or ending the Diamondback series. And it's like I need a competent bench bat somewhere. We thought Merrifield was going to be it last year, and he just turned out to be an asshole. Yeah. They've kind of been lacking that obviously it's different. The DH is a thing, but like that Greg Dahl type bench bat type, you can get this thing. And Lamont Wade isn't like that profile of a hitter in terms of like just swing for the fence and pray you luck into a home run like those guys kind of were. But he's steady. He can play every day. He can give Harper a spell if he needs to. And, if Brennan Donovan in the other trade needs a break or wants to play center field and you're facing a righty, you can put Lamont Wade in left field and just absolutely load up on lefties.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I definitely don't hate it at all there. I do think there is the argument for a platoon in left field. A lot of teams do that. A lefty, bring in a lefty and a righty, and then it upgrades your bench because one of them isn't starting that day, and you have a pretty good player on the bench. So that also makes sense. There are a couple different routes to go there, and I definitely see that one.
Yeah, I mean, another thing too. I try to keep realistic. My number one option, but I think he's going to be too expensive. I'd love him to get Teoscar Hernandez and kind of go back to that righty power bat that we talked about. But I'd be shocked if he left LA. It's probably going to be a multi-year deal, probably around $20 million a year, if I had to guess. So I just don't think that we go after a hitter like that. But like he'd fit great in our lineup. I feel like we've kind of talked about him at trade deadlines the last few years, and then the offseason last year. I think I was scared of the strikeout percentage, but like he fits seamlessly in that Dodgers lineup. And, watching those games, like shit, that'd be really nice to have a guy like that. So I'd love for them to get him. I don't think it's in the card. So I was kind of pivoting, and it definitely lacks the righty bats. It's very lefty heavy, but I think those are Donovan and Wade are definitely guys that they could use in terms of what those hitter profiles kind of look like.
Yeah. So you had another trade, right?
Those are the only two I had. I had signings, but they were all very minor.
Okay. So we backed off of the Crochet thing?
Yes, I backed off the Crochet trade. I thought about it, and then I saw a report that like the Red Sox, somebody else, and the Dodgers were viewed as the favorites.
The Orioles,
yeah. I don't know. I don't know what they do as far as giving a pitcher an extension with Ola under contract for 7 years, Sanchez under contract for the next 3. Wheeler, you have to obviously, like Zach Wheeler, Cy Young finalist again, but like. The wild card for me with giving Crochet an extension is Andrew Painter just being an absolute stud. And then you have Wheeler's contract by the time a Painter extension would probably be done. Wheeler's contract would probably be up, but like Sanchez might be on the last year of his. Crochet would want, huge money. Nola, you'd still have probably 3 or 4 years tied to an aging Aaron Nola with a lot of money. So like I'd rather take my chances with Painter than throw like 150 or 200 million at Garrett Crochet. I don't know if that's crazy. Maybe it's me seeing the Tigers whiff on their first talks with Tariq Skubal and holding out hope that, somehow a trade, maybe if the Tigers stink, or like if Reek hits the free agent market, obviously everybody and Mom will be lined up to sign Tariq Skubal, but Crochet's a stud. The reliever history worries me. The inning history worries me, and the arm injury history worries me as far as tying like 200 million into Garrett Crochet. So that, and among the report that we weren't one of the favorites, I kind of backed off that a little bit.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So we do have one debate topic I want to finish with, but before we do that, I did want to look at MLB free agents. This will load. Love all the pop-up ads on here. I
think my other 3 signings, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're gonna get in. So the other 3 signings, I'm done with Garrett Stubbs. I'm done with the boombox boy. I'm done with the beer guy.
Well, that's what I was gonna get into. But yeah.
Yeah, that's why they've lost their fun privilege. They lost their playlist privilege, and frankly, he lost his privilege to be on a baseball team. So I'm going with. I was debating. I know we talked about it before we started, and he actually signed today. I wanted Travis Arnaud. He's too expensive, and he proved to be too expensive. He signed a 1-year, $13 million deal with the Angels. That is, obviously they've said that they want to get JT off his feet more. So like, yes, backup catcher, sure. But like $13 million for a platoon catcher is just too much for me. So I'm going with Kyle Higashioka. He had a good playoff for the Padres. I have him at 1 year, 2 million. It might be more like 4 million because he had that good playoffs and he's typically good controlling a pitching staff. So I signed him. I signed Kevin Newman as a backup infielder, good fielder. OPS plus last year was 91. So like obviously not, hitting the cover off the ball, but like serviceable. I looked at his savant a little bit. The rate, the K rate are very high. He only struck out 15.4% of the time. So like, again, not going to hit the cover off the ball, but also I can't watch Edmundo Sosa swing at like 8 balls in the other batter's box and like try and convince myself that it's fine because he's a backup. Like, yes, Sosa's good. You can keep him around, sure. I just better decisions from the lineup. So I'm trying to focus on guys like that. It's boring, I know, but I just can't watch guys flail at pitches in the other batter's box anymore. And then my last signing was AJ Minter, 1 year, 4 million. Coming off, I believe he was hurt a little bit last year. Familiar with the division, been with the Braves forever. Strom is obviously a stud. He faded a bit towards the end. Tanner Banks, he's just Brad Hand to me, even though Dombrowski's convinced that he could get them out this year. And obviously Alvarado was a roller coaster last year, so I kind of want another be competing for a spot. Hopefully at least 2 of those 4 guys could pull ahead from the pack and, give you good consistent outs, whether it's, Alvarado and Strom, Minter and Strom. Somebody like one of those guys pulls ahead as the top lefty option that can get Ohtani's and Freeman's and Olson's and everybody out. But a cheap lefty, I thought about doing a Aroldis Chapman, but I know like the minute that's just Kimbrel all over again to me. Like a fail, not a once upon a time elite closer that is now like a journeyman on like these bad teams, and then you try and sign him. And he's good for a month like he was for the Pirates last year, and he blows up in your face. So
yeah,
I stayed from that after he's been burnt the last few years. But yeah, just cheap margin signings that can, hopefully restore some normalcy to a clubhouse that has driven me crazy the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page with the Stubbs thing, although I just have them going with Marshawn, giving him a chance for a year.
I wouldn't hate that too.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm done with Stubbs. And I think that's a shakeup that they need for a reality check. I think Marsh is more of a baseball move. I think getting rid of Stubbs is more of a like a personal type, I don't want to say like shot at them, but like a, hey, this isn't all fun and games type thing.
Yeah, so it feels like it could be a
message that has to be sent. Yeah.
And like my thing is too, it's like Thompson has this reputation of being such a great players manager, which is great. Like I definitely want him to be respected by the team, and I want the team to like him. Like it was miserable watching them play for Girardi, and Girardi being this kind of like no emotions manager and everything. Like it seems to me like it's become too buddy the last few years. So like eliminate the little brother from the clubhouse, Stubbs, the guy who has, talked too much for the amount of time that he's played going back to the Diamondback series, and like eliminate distractions and, start getting back to being a serious clubhouse.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So I did want to finish on kind of the starting pitching thing. So if you look at this list here, it's really good. If this was 3 years ago, this list would be monstrous. Scherzer, Verlander, Snell, Patrick Corbin, Morton, Evaldi, Montas, Burns, Fried, Manaea, Flaherty, Bieber. Like 3 years ago, yeah, we'd be talking about like the greatest free agent pitching class of all time. I'm looking more towards down here because we're trying to find a Spencer Turnbull type with the not ticking time bomb injury. Nick Martinez intrigues me because he can give you some length. Like it's a righty Strom, I feel like if he has to start for you a few times, he can, and then he could also be a multi-inning reliever. So Nick Martinez is really high on my list. I don't know what you think about him, but he was definitely one that came to mind. And then I was trying to stay with righties. Now Nick Pavetta's down there.
You got a
I don't
qualifying
know.
offer, dude. He'd be crazy not to take that.
Yeah. Colin Ray was like another interesting one. Like a reunite with Lorenzen? Like I don't know what you think about these, but Mike Soroka, I know like Jack Fritz is really high on him right now. There's a lot of different options out here that are interesting to me. And I think when you look at like the top names that a lot of these teams are going to be focusing on up here, you have a chance to swoop in and grab maybe one or two of these guys to be, swing guys and stuff like that, because all these other teams are going to be courting those big name guys. So you come in and while those other teams aren't talking to these guys, you come in and offer them a deal. I think you could get a couple steals here.
Yeah, I mean, Colin Ray is definitely one that intrigues me. I think you mentioned Fritz loving Soroka. He mentioned it on when they did their perfect offseason. Like the fact that Walker Buehler was like hurt all year and awful all year, and then just shoved in the playoffs sucks, because now he's probably going to get way too much money to be like the fifth starter on this team. But like Alex Cobb is interesting. Like he's old. He'd probably be cheap. He has like a decent pedigree, and he could also like he's a known innings eater. If they like show up with Kyle Gibson or Michael Lorenzen, I will be like livid. But yeah, Nick Martinez would be awesome. He's kind of like that same profile, like you mentioned, as Strom was when they signed Strom in free agency. Martinez was good for the Padres a few years ago. He was okay for the Reds. I mean the Reds pitching wasn't great in general. So yeah, I believe he throws kind of like a heavy sinker. So I always like those pitches. Yeah, Martinez would probably be my favorite out of he'd probably be at that upper tier of the cheapish options.
Yeah, I agree. So he's definitely one I was looking at. And then, those other guys, I'd be happy with any of those. If you get, like, I don't know if you could get any of these guys in like a minor league deal. Did James Paxton retire? But like if you could get one of these guys down here, even on like a minor league deal, to give you some possible depth, because we know someone's going to get hurt, and I just don't want to go through the Phillips type stuff again and the Allard type stuff. If we can get someone legit trying to just stay relevant and get them on a minor league deal too, that would be great. But Martinez and Ray are kind of at the top of the list for me. And then whatever you could kind of filter in behind them would be nice.
Sure. Matt Boyd would probably be good, but he had a really good year. So
I'm not sure. So kind of just to recap. So I have out Stubbs, Marsh, Estevez, Turnbull. I do need to touch the bench. I just honestly I was like, those are so minor moves. And bringing in Munoz, bringing back Hoffman, Santander, and then, maybe one of Nick Martinez or Colin Ray. So not anything crazy, but I think it's enough of a move right now, and it keeps them flexible to us in a sense for the deadline, which we've been saying this for like 3 years now. I feel like when they haven't done anything, but maybe this is the year they do.
Yeah, I have out Stubbs, Marsh, and some lower level prospects, Estevez too, I guess. In Higashioka, Kevin Newman, AJ Minter, Jeff Hoffman, Ryan Helsley, Brendan Donovan, and Lamont Wade. Again, like I think in total this year that would be adding like maybe like around 30 million to the books. Not like I think that would push them to the next tax threshold, but at this point, the Dodgers winning the World Series was probably good for us in the sense that like winning it in the way that they did too. It's like they were dominant. So like, you can't say, oh, we just got unlucky. We ran into a hot team. Like, no, the hot team that you lost to, then gave up like the most runs ever in the NLCS to the team that won the World Series in the league.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make moves to compete. This wasn't a fluke run that we've kind of seen out of the National League the last few years, ours included, in terms of like the 60 making it. It was the highest spending team, dominating everyone outside of the Padres, really, from start to finish of, like August. Like they were wire to wire, one of the best teams the whole year. And then the playoffs came and they just turned it up. That their NLDS series was the World Series because that was the only team that even looked like they belonged on a baseball field with the Dodgers.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they were dismantling teams while they were throwing bullpen games in the playoffs. Like that.
Yeah, and they were throwing a lot of bullpen games. It wasn't like once a series. It was like every other game.
Yeah, their pitching rotation that was injured would be a top 5 rotation in baseball.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous run. But yeah, it is. I think it is good. Yeah, so that's going to do it for this one. Kind of middle of November here, so I wouldn't expect anything to really start happening until early December. So maybe
winter meetings are the first or second week of December. So I think Passan hinted at that's when Soto might decide. So probably around then the dominoes will start to fall.
Yeah, so unless something big happens before then, you'll hear from us around then if there's rumors or some signings happen. So we'll be back then as the Phillies embark on another stupid money offseason. So we'll see you then.